With Sam Fuller, I'm a huge fan of Sam Fuller. One of my ultimate favorites, we already talked about in a previous episode, is Pickup on South Street. But here, a lot of people consider this his masterpiece, which is Shock Corridor, which he did a year before The Naked Kiss. At the time when it came out, people hated it. You can go look in reviews of how people were disgusted by it and cheap and crass and everything. But now it's considered a classic. It's on the Criterion Collection.
It was the 19th film in the Criterion Collection, so it was an early pick.
Yeah.
What's funny is when you mentioned that, as I was watching it, I paused quick because I was like, I got to see what Academy Award nominations it's got. And I was going, oh.
So we're going to talk about Sam Fuller talking about Arkham Asylum before there was an Arkham Asylum.
Don't be shocked, we're back. Welcome back to the show. I'm one of your hosts, Kyle Goethe from GoatFilmReviews.com.
This actually was titled, the script was actually titled Straight Jacket. So,
there you go.
I'm Nick from the St. Paul Filmcast. Thanks for finding us. Thanks for watching. And for our loyal fans, thank you for continuing to support the show. Hey, we do have our Patreon. Check that out for some great deals and great content. And, of course, an opportunity to tell us what movies we can review here on the show. Of course, we'll give you a plug out, plug
of course,
in.
yeah.
Whatever, plug for doing that as well. You can follow us on Twitter and on Instagram. And, of course, we are members of the Minnesota Film Critics Alliance. Check out that webpage for critics reviews as well as ours. And today we're talking about Sam Fuller's classic from 1963, Shock Corridor.
All right, Johnny Barrett, determined to win the Pulitzer, goes undercover in an asylum to expose a killer seen only by 3 inmates. As he gets closer to the truth, though, his mind is corrupted by the institution's weird practices. Can he keep his sanity long enough to uncover the truth?
So initially, Sam Fuller wrote the script for Fitz Lane in the early 40s called Straight Jacket. The premise was a journalist trying to commit himself into a insane asylum, telling everybody he's crazy, to get in there to investigate a murder that was covered up at that location. It plays on your psychological thrillers. Scorsese's called this movie the inspiration for Shutter Island. Shutter Island's kind of a mix of Dr. Caligari, and then this movie.
That's the case where you can see the adaptation of the book, but you can also really see the inspiration from this film, too. It's a real melding, which is what Scorsese is really capable of doing.
I'll just recap, because I talked a lot about on our review for Pickup on South Street. Sam Fuller got his bones. He was a World War II, but also he was a tabloid journalist. Not a yellow journalist. He was a tabloid journalist. So he writes just like a tabloid journalist. This movie is kind of, the dialogue is chappy. That's kind of crass. It's kind of in-your-face punch all the time. He writes like that. So it's very much, and it looks like it's going to be soft. It's kind of like constantly selling you sex, selling you violence, selling you, danger all the time.
There's the expectation that a movie from the 60s, especially a black and white movie from
the 60s,
chill
chill out,
is going to get a certain level of extremity, but there's a capper to it. Watching this film after 8 seasons of Game of Thrones, all of a sudden you're like, incest, you say?
Right.
It's such a taboo subject for then.
Yeah.
It's just like, I can't believe 5 minutes into the movie, I'm like, oh, we're going there.
My cover story to get in the same assignment is I am infatuated with my sister. And he plays it pretty well at the doctor's office.
He does, and I really like how they pair off with that kiss that she tries to give him later on in the film, that he's like, you're going to ruin it. Like, I really think that's a captivating and weird way to get yourself into an asylum.
Sam Fuller also likes to keep a lot of the people that he works with continuously. He doesn't like to incorporate new people on the crew. So it's edited by Jerome Tomes, who actually edited Pal Joey and other Sam Fuller films like Underworld USA, which we haven't talked about, Naked Kiss, which came in after this movie, and The Crimson Kimono, which is one of my favorites also. It's a very noir. And then he also did from Columbia Pictures The Devil's Mask, and guess what? He got that editing down to 90 minutes.
Oh,
The
there
Devil's
you go.
Mask, right. But he got a lot of accolades for his editing for Pal Joey. Cinematography is Stanley Cortez. He also did the cinematography for The Night Hunter, Three Faces of Eve, which Joanne Woodward got an Oscar nomination. I think she actually won for that. And then he did cinematography for The Naked Kiss. The Black Cat is where he first started, the Universal Pictures.
Oh, okay.
With Bela Lugosi.
Good old Black Cats.
Yeah, Edgar Allan Poe story. And then he did cinematography for The Magnificent Ambersons. So he comes from a very colorful background, very full, and works with Sam Fuller, where Sam is like, maybe 3 takes and we're moving on.
Yeah.
Which I can see Orson Welles like, let's get it right. Let's sit here for weeks to make sure we get the right shot. Where Sam's like, we got it. All right, put it in the tank. We're moving on.
Yep.
Yeah, very different directing. Scorsese said in his documentary, A Personal Journey. My God, if you haven't watched Scorsese's documentary, it's called My Personal Journey in Film, you have to. It's very enticing. It's not a linear. It's just his scope of what he... It's kind of like he popcorned different themes about and goes back to investigating films. For him, he viewed Sam Fuller's Shock Horror as saying this is a metaphor for America, that America is entirely an insane asylum. To get part of it, you have to be mask who you are and become somebody else to participate in America. And that was kind of his point of view for what he thought Sam Fuller was making. And I'll get my review about what I think about it aesthetically. So, off to you.
Well, and so I think also with this film, we're looking at something that, I like to view classic films from a new lens, from a current lens. Right. And I think there's that viewpoint here that the film definitely doesn't get all the elements of mental health awareness correct in this film. There's some very 1960s viewpoints on things that...
No, if you go to a psychiatric ward, they're not going to use the word insane. That's a legal lawyer court term. Psychiatrists will never use that word. It's not even a word that's even in textbooks of psycho disorders.
Yeah, and like many films of the time, if you're going to portray someone with mental health disorders, they kind of portray the most extreme version of these kind of characters. The guy who thinks he's Pagliacci, so he's constantly singing.
Who's way overweight and he likes to eat.
Yeah, exactly. The guy who thinks that he's still in the middle of the war. And like, they do it, but... What I like to look at with the film is when you're looking at those mental health issues through the lens of this film, sure, they're antiquated, sure, they're a little bit older, but the thing about them is that it looks all the way through like Samuel Fuller is respecting the characters that he's on there with. He's not doing it heightened like this to make fun of them, which I think is an important statement to have, because you could look at this movie and you could think that he was making fun of them, but when you watch the film, you see that he is really honoring and respecting these characters, or doing the best that he can to within that time frame. Because one thing I really like about Samuel Fuller is he was kind of a hard ass. He was kind of a combative guy, but he also respected the people around him too, and knew he could get the best out of them. And I think that's really indicative of the film that's here, and that's why I think it is sustained for 60 years.
So it stars Peter Beck, who got actually a big hit after this movie, being in the TV show called Big Valley. Of course, it's a ranch in the westerns in his late 60s. Yes, playing his cover-up. Female is Constance Tower. She actually married John Gavin. I'm sure she saw Psycho with John Gavin with his shirt off and said, heck yeah, like everybody else did in the beginning of the movie, yeah. And she married John Gavin, which is interesting.
Constance Towers also appears in the 4th Karate Kid film. So she was definitely still working up until the 80s and 90s.
Wow.
It's interesting to see people that have made that kind of complete jump in their career where they're still kind of performing later on in life. And while the 4th Karate Kid film is not necessarily a great film,
no,
it's interesting to see that she was still performing well.
She plays this kind of like a stripper, but like a burlesque mix of a stripper, so it's not very gratuitous, but it's very kind of selling it. But she plays it so awkward.
Yeah.
She plays it like it's not her forte. Like she's kind of forced into this profession somehow.
I felt like it was kind of basically how you would do strippers in the 60s. Like, this is what we can do to make this work in the 60s. But that's, again, like Samuel Fuller also tends to be very good at implication, which is, I think, something that he's doing with that character.
And then it rounds out with Gene Evans, who also worked with Sam Fuller on Steel Helmet. He was a lead character with that, which is another Steel Helmet I use as inspiration for my comic book, The Green Way, who's I consider one of his best also. Overall you have this motion, which is, 3 sets at most?
Yeah, very few. I'm struggling to even wonder if the sets where he's practicing early in the film, I think those are his boss's office. So you even keep that office there. I think the 4th set would probably be the stage that she's dancing on. That's it.
And then there's the famous thing is MGM wanted to use the set they built, the corridor, for another movie. And Sam's like, the hell you are. And he's turned on the waterworks for it. And he put that in the movie. He's like, we're going to somehow fit this into the movie. We're going to trash the set so you can't use it.
Yeah.
But I always thought when I initially saw it that was the end of the movie where it was water raining inside the corridor, and that's not it. It comes in, actually not even, it's in the part of the third act, but it's not the complete end of the movie.
Yeah, we get a couple more scenes afterwards, but it was something that was done, after production was done on the film. Production was over. So imagine being Peter Brecken getting a call from Sam Fuller and being like, I need you to come back in.
And have
We're going to try to drown you.
Yeah, and have a huge meltdown. Yeah. And
Yeah.
it was raining, and we're turning on the faucets.
But I think both of us have been on film sets where you get to the end of production and you kind of feel like you're having a meltdown anyway. So, sometimes you just need to get that energy out.
And of course, you already filmed for a week, so the food over there is kind of like the last of it, like the sandwiches and all that stuff's gone.
One other thing I wanted to note as well is that this film was unavailable in UK cinemas due to its content up until 1990. So in the UK, this film was not readily available until then. And what's funny is that, it became available in 1990. You could finally see the film. And 6 years later in America, we had already gotten to the point where the National Film Registry and the Library of Congress was adding it to its culturally, aesthetically important films list. Really, like, you can see kind of that. Right? Well, you can see that missing a movie for 30 years misses 30 years of appreciation and learning and kind of working towards it. This is why it's important to have readily available cinemas, because you get that constant appreciation. And one of the great things about the current state of streaming.
Side note, because you talked about banning and Sam Fuller movies, his movie, the last movie he did for MGM, White Dog, which is based on a racist person training his white dog to go after colored people, is still banned. I think there's even hard to even find a copy of that here in America. So Sam Fuller Properties is still holding on to that.
Yeah, when you look at Sam Fuller, even on like the Letterboxd app, like White Dog comes up I think it comes up higher than Shot Corridor in terms of its popularity, like in terms of the amount of people researching, looking at it. Harder to find films make them something you hunt for a lot more. That's what I did with The Devils. It's like, I couldn't find this movie. Well, I'm going to find it,
I can't imagine, before we get to our review, I can't imagine going into MGM Studios and then you go, what do you got for our next movie? It's Crimson Komodo. Well, I got a story about a racist Japanese cop falling in love with this all-American girl in L.A.
He does pack his taglines. Every one of his films you could say in one sentence and someone would be like, son of a bitch, I'm in.
Yeah. Well, that's going to sell really well in the Midwest, isn't
it?
Yeah.
So, comparing this film to a Pickup on South Street, I liked Pickup on South Street. I was positive in the film as we talked about it.
That's my personal favorite.
But I also feel like that is the movie, I can see why that would be. Like, that matches a lot of like those Nick positives.
Yeah.
Looking at that film is still very much of a specific like story plot. Like, it is a very, there are things that are familiar about that film. Shot Corridor, to me, at least, especially of the time, is such a unique idea. It's very simplistic, where you could have this kind of a story of, I'm going to go undercover to find a killer. Sure, that's one thing, but I'm going to go undercover in a mental health facility, in an asylum, to find a killer. It's such a ludicrous idea.
Right. Well, and then the people around him are trying to tell him to stop, and he's still going to go. Almost like William Hurt in Body Heat. Stop going out with this girl. I'm going to keep doing it.
Yeah, it's very much it's indicative of all these films where like the character goes undercover in another land, or a person who, like a Dances with Wolves or an Avatar, where like a person becomes like entrenched in another culture to the point where it starts to like
take over.
Yeah, grab onto them and not let go. That's what's there.
This is my third time seeing it, and I had inklings of like Body Heat, of Ned constantly going after Kathleen Turner's character, even though everybody's telling her to stop. Also, I like Promising Young Woman.
Yeah,
of just stop.
A person on a vendetta that is
corrupting her and it's going to almost kill her. And this guy's on a mission. He's obsessive. He's going to, find out who killed this person in the same time, even if it's going to make him go crazy.
Well, it's clever to have him being a journalist, being a writer, being a person who's trying to tell the story more so than a person who's trying to hold someone accountable. Because the thing is, if you were a cop going undercover, there's no way you could get any of this evidence to stick up in court. Like, especially because you're interviewing people that don't exactly have their faculties in place to be a corroboratory witness. So, like, there's no way that this story leads to a positive ending police-wise. But he's hoping that he can further his career and also expose injustice at the same time. So it's a smart idea to have him be the journalist. I know that Sam Fuller had a journalism background, but this was the smartest choice of that character, because he could have very easily made him a cop, and then the whole narrative falls to ribbons.
Right.
So it's a smart decision for that. And I think Peter Breck plays a character who doesn't have, like, he looks like a strong guy, but he seems like a guy that he's playing that is more weak. Is
a little
more,
naive.
Yeah. And so that's a great performance piece, is that he could very easily kind of play this macho head game, and he doesn't.
Yeah.
He plays it down.
Overall, I think the entire theme that Sam Fuller is trying to go for is one word, is mistreatment.
Yep.
Everybody in this, even the characters, are mistreated and disrespected. You have the stripper who constantly is getting disrespected. You have the journalist being disrespected for his profession and his noble ability to go into this. But all the characters in the same asylum are being mistreated and disrespected. And everybody else, I think the entire theme is that of disrespecting somebody even when they have a mental problem.
Yep. And even and the idea of the dramatic irony of disrespect, in that
Right.
you have that second witness who is a black man who has gotten to the point where he believes that he is a white man and says some of the most incredibly racist things I've almost ever heard.
And he's wearing the Ku Klux Klan.
Yeah, and it's 1963. It was an incredibly hard sequence to watch, but it reminded me, I wonder if Dave Chappelle got the idea for his sketch about the black, blind, white supremacist from this character.
Somebody in the writing room.
Yeah. Because he plays that kind of like with the insightful comedy used to critique, whereas this is using drama to critique. But it's an incredibly strong character piece that subplot comes out of nowhere. And so in most other films, it would feel like it's intruding on the narrative. But it doesn't. It comes in, it sits there, and then it also guides its way back out. And it's just another case. It almost feels anthological in the film.
Sam Fuller does that in Steel Helmet, where you have a Korean descendant who's an American who actually comes in contact with a Korean fighting in Korea, saying, "What the hell are you doing here? You're Korean, but you're from a different country." This whole mixture of doesn't make a lot of sense. Right. The black guy is spitting out the most racist things you can say. America for Americans. What the hell?
Yeah. Well,
Right.
and he's surrounded by people that are going to side with him because they've been put in this position where, like, they're all kind of embracing everybody. Peter Breck's character, you can tell Johnny doesn't know what to do when that comes in. Does he pretend to be aligned with him?
Yeah.
Does he try to sway him out of this? Because there's obviously other black men in this community, in this asylum, that are being subjugated by someone of their own race, which is like shocking to me. And it works really well as almost a side story within the larger narrative. It feels like a novel in some ways, where this is a subplot that doesn't take away from the actual A plot.
It's one of those where the protagonist, alt-white, wins, but he loses so much to gain that win.
Mm-hmm.
And so, to point that he's never going to come back to what he was from the beginning. His full circle is going to be that he never fully recovers. And actually, he believes the psychosis that he manufactured to get into that.
Yeah, it's a very Tales from the Crypt ending. For a non-horror story, it's a very Tales from the Crypt. I've come to a place now where I've been subjugated in the same way.
Yeah, so it's very much like the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, where the guy escapes the insane asylum, but all the things he sees in the streets seem similar to what he sees at the insane asylum. So has he just manufactured this hallucination to entertain himself? It's very much like Shutter Island. Did you manufacture the story just to keep your brain busy? Maybe crack it, but it's still, you're repeating the pattern almost.
Yeah.
Very much like the German Expressionism movies of the silent era. German Expressionism, like Fritz Lang was using in the silent era of psycho thrillers and stuff like that. So, yeah, it doesn't play like that because Sam Fuller shoots straight forward. There's no real tricky shots in the movie. Maybe the death scenes where the camera's lifted up, but that's the punch. That's what he wants to use. The action is there. He holds the camera, and then you're going to spout out the most venomous stuff and shock everybody. The shocking content is the dialogue. It's not so much that somebody got murdered. That's kind of like soft, right?
Yeah.
Somebody got murdered here, which is like, well, yeah.
And then the more you're there, you're like, yeah, I can believe that. Like,
Yeah,
I
right.
believe that would happen here.
Right.
You're right, because I think the only time where he really utilizes cinematography in a unique way is you can tell the lack of sets in the film causes you to reframe a lot of these sequences, move the set design around, get the camera in a little bit of a different position so you can use the same set 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times. and get the most out of your limited sets. But that's also a way I think this film said it's shot in like 10 days. I can believe that because there's limited sets, there's limited characters.
Yeah.
I want to go back though to that finale. Actually, I think that the rain, the flooding in the corridor, is accidentally the most integral part to the story to me.
Yeah.
This is what completes the film. This would have been, in my mind, a good film had it not included this. I think it is a greater film
because it shows the character finally giving into his mental disorder.
Yes.
You finally know, okay, now he's crazy.
Yes, and the thing is, he's lost in the weeds. He's looking to escape. He's looking to get to the other end, and we still don't know by the end of it if he's going to make that. It's such a perfect encapsulation of what's going on in Johnny's mind that we don't get because the film is very straight-laced with its set. This is really happening.
The rain is kind of like he's being baptized into his craziness, but the lightning bolt that hits him, it's almost like the christening.
Yeah.
You're never going to come back from that.
So the combination of that artistic choice, which was done just to be an asshole,
right?
and I also, my other favorite part of the film was the use of the color footage in the dreams to integrate into the black and white footage.
Yeah.
I know that was purely done. I
forgot all about that.
The explanation for why it's in color is done purely like it's someone making up an explanation because they used color footage in a black and white film, but it's done so cleverly that it makes the color footage more artistically sound to the narrative. It gives it a reason why it's different, why it pops. And that's so incredibly clever to use what you have. This is a great film to watch if you're a filmmaker or a filmmaker aspiring. Watch this movie, because it shows you how to use no money at all and make something great with it.
And at most 3 sets, the hallway, but you can see the walls painted to extend the hallway, and maybe 3 offices are function that you can rotate into different things.
Yeah,
now, I don't think you ever see a ceiling in this movie.
I'm thinking now.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, it's one of those incredibly clever things that the more that I watch it, the more I kept thinking about it.
There's nothing to look at other than the characters. Black and white subtracts distraction too. It's black and white. That's why it's gives it a punch, because there's nothing else to look at other than these characters' derangement.
Yeah, and quite a fitting thing to have a film with a character that worked on the A-bomb to be rewatching it or watching it for the first time in the year of Oppenheimer. So just everything goes back. Everything goes back around.
So, keep the conversation going. What all do you think about Shock Corridor? Is there another Sam Folder do you want us to do? My God, there's still much more of his films we could talk about. Naked Kiss is another dangerous one. Naked Kiss is another one of those punch kind of a things in the gut kind of a movie.
Yeah, so let us know your thoughts on the film down below. Compare it to Pick Up on South Street, the other film we've already covered. Which one do you like more and why? And yeah, tell us which one we should cover next, because we're definitely going to come back to the realm of Samuel Fuller. There's more of his films. If we can actually find a copy of
House
some of
at
his
Bamboo Street, Still Gone, 40 Guns, which is, wow, okay.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So thank you guys for joining us for this episode of
Yes, thank you.
on Film. And you can find all of my film reviews over at goldfilmreviews.com.
You can find my show, the St. Paul Filmcast, anywhere you find podcasts. You can even listen to it in the psych ward.